Hello and welcome to a new episode of KET Talks. I'm Vincent and I will be your host today, joined by my colleague Rémy Bonny, the Executive Director of Forbidden Colors. Together, we wish you a wonderful new year. Rémy, are you ready to make Belgium and Europe more inclusive in 2023?
Of course, and as you know, Vincent, we have a lot of exciting plans for the coming year, which we won't talk about today because we want to give it as a surprise to the listeners of KET Talks. Let's jump into the next discussion.
In this episode, we will discuss the situation of LGBTIQ+ people in Hungary. Joining our conversation today, let me first introduce David Bedö. David, you're a member of the National Parliament in Hungary for the liberal and progressist political party Momentum, a party currently sitting in the opposition. You're also the chair of a newly funded parliamentary intergroup for a diverse Hungary, working on LGBTIQ+ rights. Thanks for joining us. How are you feeling?
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's a very nice day here in Brussels, so I'm happy to jump into the discussion today.
Finally, let me introduce Noel Simon. Noel, you're a researcher on LGBTIQ+ issues and the coordinator of this new intergroup in the Hungarian Parliament. Thanks for joining us. How are you today?
Yeah, hi there. Thanks for the invitation as well. I'm doing fine and I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Thank you. Well, if everyone is ready, let's start. For our first topic, we'll try to get our listeners more familiar with the current situation in Hungary for LGBTIQ+ people. In the early 2000s, Hungary was on the path of strengthening the rights of LGBTIQ+ people with, for example, the introduction of registered partnership in 2009, even if in 2011 the parliament voted the modification of the constitution restricting marriage to opposite legal sex couples. Yet, in the last 3 years, under the government of Viktor Orbán, Hungary has been taking concrete steps against the rights of LGBTIQ+ people. In May 2020, the parliament adopted a law making it impossible for transgender people to change their legal sex. In December 2020, a modification of the constitution was voted to prevent adoption by same legal sex couple. And in June 2021, a law now known as the Hungarian anti-LGBT propaganda law was adopted to forbid any promotion or depiction of LGBTIQ+ people and topics. Can you tell us more about what this means for the LGBTIQ+ people in your country?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the situation is quite dire in Hungary currently. There has been numerous atrocities in our country against LGBTQ people. It's interesting because from the 90s, the country started a progression and more openness towards not just LGBTQ people, but all minorities. And in 2010, the Orbán government first came to power with a supermajority. And from there on out, it was basically a downhill progression. Well, it wasn't a progression. We were going downhill in many areas. And one of this was the discrimination against LGBTQ people. And as you mentioned, there has been numerous in the past couple of years laws, legislations passed that discriminate against LGBTQ people. One of them among them is they changed the constitution. They just had the absolute need to put it in the constitution that the mother is a woman and the father is a man, thus basically very much limiting same-sex marriage and also adoption. Now, currently in Hungary, you have to have a minister's approval to adopt as a same-sex couple. And the other thing that you also mentioned is Article 33, which basically prohibits sex changes for transgender people. But there are also numerous other problems in the country, unfortunately.
Yeah, there also have been issues with the LGBT propaganda law and the depiction of LGBTIQ+ people in the media, so on TV, radio, also books have been either banned or fined. How does the community react to that? What is the situation for LGBTIQ+ people then?
Okay, so basically trying to limiting the access to LGBTQI content is just really bad for the society and for the LGBTQI children, especially about the bullying happening in schools. It just doesn't help. You know, Fidesz and the government of Hungary is always describing themselves as protecting the children, protecting the families. And, you know, it's just not about protecting children. It's them saying that LGBTQI plus children are basically not existing in Hungary. And I think this is not what it's supposed to be if you say that I'm protecting the children and I'm protecting families. It's just nonsense.
It's also, so to say, interesting that Fidesz and the government calls it just child protection law, what we call the propaganda law. It's basically copy-pasted from the Russian version that they implemented a few years back. And one of the big problems is that the bill itself is a mess. Even very experienced lawyers are not sure how to interpret that given law. And there's still no interpretation from any court or any institution that gives clear view on what can be done in schools and what cannot be done. So in this fog of the unknown, basically, teachers and school psychologists don't know if they can talk about these issues or they can't. And thus, they are afraid to talk about it. And even in a therapy session in school, for example, it's a limited topic, and especially on the countryside, which poses a huge problem.
Yes, and of course it is going beyond what is happening in schools. It's also in the audiovisual media, for instance. Part of the law prohibits depicting LGBTQ people on television or on the radio before 10 o'clock in the evening. And one immediate consequence of that is that the commercial television, RTL, which is actually an international group, while having shown the advertisements of Budapest Pride over the last decade, basically, since this year, they're not doing it anymore because they are afraid of the repercussions by the government because of that.
The law has not been really implemented, meaning like there's not been court cases, but it has caused a very strong chilling effect on society, which means that there's a lot of self-censorship at the end, that people don't talk about LGBTIQ plus topic, I mean, in media, radio, but also at schools. Or is it the same in the society at large, in everyday discussions? Did you feel this effect on the ground?
Yeah, so I would rather say that Hungary is divided into two parts, basically. It's, the bigger progressive cities with the pioneering lead of Budapest, where, it's more accepted and, you can be basically yourself. I myself belong to the LGBT community, and it's kind of a thing for LGBTQ people and teenagers basically in Hungary, that you move to whether a bigger city or to Budapest, where you can be yourself and you just speak about it, you can connect with like-minded people or fellow LGBTQIA plus members. And on the other hand, it's getting worse and worse in the countryside. I mean, Fidesz is really controlling the minds of people by kind of encouraging them, as you said, for self-censorship. And, I think it's really bad for the society as a whole, and not just talking about Budapest, because it rather seems like the country is deeply polarized, and it's not just in this matter.
And in terms of, I think, of financing of the LGBTI plus community and NGOs, I guess there's no financing happening now at the national level. So all these organizations, do they rely on international funding? How can they survive in this environment?
Well, the thing is that they never really had any national funding, so from the government, at least not in the past 12 years. So I don't think this law changed anything regarding financing. They just never had. They always had to rely on international funds. The thing is, back around 4 years ago, we had another law called the civil law, which basically also a copy paste of the Russian law that said that all civil organizations, NGOs, have to put it on their website if they're funded internationally. Thankfully, that already got struck down by the European Court of Justice, so they had to repeal that law. But we had that as well.
So as you say, you also belong to the LGBTIQ plus community. We have a lot of common friends actually in Budapest. I know that some of these friends also are really thinking about leaving the country. Do you see a future in Hungary, knowing that you have been scapegoated as a community for many, many years?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually like, people just say that those who belong to the LGBT society, they want more and more. They are not even discriminated. I mean, that's just the way that people usually think because of the propaganda that is undergoing. But you really need to understand the fact that even though you can find a job, basically, as whether being gay, lesbian, or bisexual, but if we're talking about whether intersex people or transgender people, there's an article that David was talking about, Article 33, prohibiting the legal sex change of transgender people. And by limiting this, I wouldn't say that the whole community can find themselves in the future of Hungary if this will be undergoing. Even though if you can find like a good job, I want a family. I mean, I want a family with my boyfriend, it's just not possible. I mean, since there's a need for ministry kind of acceptance in order to adopt a child, it's really bad.
The EU has been watching these evolutions and has been willing to intervene and pressure the Hungarian government. The European Commission has announced legal action against Hungary on the anti-LGBT propaganda law in July 2022, but has been slow to file it. Yet, it seems that under the pressure put by Forbidden Colours, the Commission has finally brought the case in front of the European Court of Justice just before Christmas. Can you tell us a little bit more why it is important for the European Union to focus so much on what is happening inside Hungary?
Yeah, sure. I think sometimes the community in Hungary, I mean, the LGBTQI community is always relying or usually relies on the European institutions to do something. It's not just the European Parliament who's basically on their side, or at least that's what they show him, but also we need a kind of help from the Council and the Commission as well. I know that they've been really slow to file this case, which is kind of outrageous in my point of view. But on the other hand, it is important to kind of pressuring the Hungarian government. I mean, pressure Orbán's Hungary, follow the Human Rights Charta, for example. People usually say that Fidesz is in a way bipolar. They are saying one thing in Hungary and doing one thing. It's basically the anti-LGBT rhetoric. And in face of the European institutions, it's always like, you know what? I was the defender of LGBTQ people when it was the change of regime. But still, what matters is what's happening in Hungary. And that's really unfortunate. So what we're trying to achieve, and what I think the EU can help us the most, is to kind of binding the Hungarian government to follow basic human rights, fundamental human rights.
And is it something that resonates in Hungary? Because, of course, the Orbán's government, their position is always to blame what is going on Brussels. So the fact that Brussels is also intervening on this issue, does it something to resonate with the public at large? Or do they also blame Brussels for the kind of sanction that can come because of this?
Of course they do. I mean, that's all they do. They scapegoat an institution or someone for all their problems. Currently, we are heading into quite a disastrous economic situation, and the sanctions are at fault, and Brussels are at fault, and everything is at fault except them, of course. So once this case hits the European Court of Justice, and there will be a ruling on it, obviously, the government, Hungarian government, Fidesz, will gonna blame Brussels for it, that they wanna force LGBTQ propaganda on Hungarian children. That's gonna be their narrative, for sure.
Do you prepare for that in a way, or how can you act in Hungary to explain that what the Commission is protecting is the EU value that actually Hungary signed when they joined the Union, because we have a Charter of Fundamental Rights that was approved by Hungary when they joined the EU, and basically this anti-propaganda law breaks some of the aspect of its Charter of Fundamental Rights. So does this message of protecting human rights is something that can resonate in Hungary?
Well, the thing is, the reason why it's very hard is obviously we're going to come out and tell people why this is important and why this piece of legislature is disastrous in Hungary, and why the European Court of Justice's ruling is a good thing for Hungary. But the thing is that we unfortunately have much less media platform than they do. They bought up, for the past 12 years, they have been buying up all the newspapers, all the TV channels, all the radio channels. They have been funded by millions and millions of euros, even billions of euros, if we look at the past decades, on how much money they put into this propaganda machine they have. So the reach we have is much, much smaller than the reach they have, especially on the countryside.
You know, it's not about people resonating. It's about, again, the depolarization which is undergoing in Hungary. It's not about forcing LGBTQI propaganda, but, it's about children who identify themselves as LGBTQ people. And, it's about them, protecting them. It's about at least 300,000 children that we're talking about, basically, now and in the upcoming years. So I think that's what might resonate with the Hungarian society.
So, David, isn't it sometimes a bit frustrating that as a national member of parliament in Hungary, you have to travel all the way to Brussels to make an impact in your country, while you as a member of the national parliament in Hungary cannot have an impact in Budapest?
I would a bit rephrase the question, so to say. It's just frustrating to be an opposition politician in Hungary. It's frustrating to be an opposition voter in Hungary, because it's just been a lot of very unsuccessful past decade, so to say. But obviously the reason why it's nice to come to Brussels, because there's a lot more like-minded people that we see the same issues with our country. And obviously my country, Hungary, is very, very important for me. And that's why I started working in politics. I want to have some sort of impact on the country and some sort of progress. I want to see some sort of progress in the country. So it is quite frustrating, yes. And in general, I see that the parliament in current Hungary is a facade, and it's only there for show. It's not a real democracy. We do have elections, but it's basically impossible to win on such elections. But we are constantly trying new methods, new tools to reach people, to show the faults of the Orbán government, and to show an alternative to the Hungarian people.
This actually makes a nice transition to our next topic, because one of the initiatives that you pushed and was launched recently in the National Parliament in Hungary was the creation of an intergroup on the right of LGBTIQ plus people, inspired by, for example, the intergroup that exists at the European Parliament. Can you tell us more, as chair and coordinator of this intergroup, what is this intergroup and what you expect from this initiative?
Yes, well, we are very proud that this got created. Back in October, the intergroup group got founded with 5 parties and 21 members from Parliament. It is a parliamentary intergroup for LGBTQ people, which is basically the main goal is to raise the issues and raise the voice for these people, for these minorities in our country. But obviously, as I said, the parliament is not really the best tool to affect any change in our country. So we are going to be looking at many, many tools that are outside of parliament. Obviously, we're going to use the parliamentary tools as well. But we have been working together with the civil society of Hungary. Many NGOs helped in founding the first LGBTQ intergroup in our country. So we're going to be working with them a lot.
Yeah, and I also wanted to shout out to Budapest Pride and Hate Society in Hungary from here as well, because they pushed the agenda of founding this after, the apathy that happened after the 2022 elections in April. It's been hard to kind of find a way to work and function as an intergroup dealing about LGBTQI rights and fundamental human rights. So that's why we wanted also to cooperate internationally. And that's why we're here in Brussels once again. I think it's not only a problem in Hungary that the government is kind of backslashing the rights of the people, basically, not just LGBTQ people, but the people and the society as a whole. So yeah, as a whole, it's really important to stress out and amplify the voices of LGBTQ people in the parliament, internationally, and to finally show that the Hungary, as it stands right now, it's not equal with the Hungary of Orbán.
So it's basically all the political parties from, let's say, the left till the center, more or less, that join?
Yes, I would say that's an accurate description. We have 2 Green parties and 2 social democratic parties, and Momentum is more like a centrist progressive party.
As an intergroup, obviously, you have a few priorities for the coming years. What are your priorities?
Yeah, basically we just did and worked out the first year plan for 2023. It consists a lot of stress and putting a lot of stress on the civil society, the diplomatic discourses and the diplomatic relationships. And also we have identified 3 key policy changes. First is being the bullying in schools, which absolutely affect the children of Hungary. It's not about just the LGBTQ children in schools, but also the Romani minority and people living disabilities, for example. And the second key policy is being the restoration of LGBT and queer rights, basically in Hungary, which we know will not be successful because of this supermajority of Fidesz, but still we wanted to show that we do care about these rights. And the third one being the restoration of the equal treatment organization, basically. So yeah, that's being the key goals for 2023. We're trying. It's hard. I would rather say. I mean, I must be honest with this, but still, I think we need to do something. We can't just say that the Hungarian society, for example, will not resonate with this, but without trying, we will never know.
So given everything that we have been discussing on what happened with the LGBTQ movement over the last years in Hungary, how do you see the future in Hungary for LGBTQ people?
Yeah, well, as I've been, thinking about a lot, just staying in Hungary, for instance. I know that a lot of my fellows, for example, not only people belonging to the society, LGBT society, but also people of my age, we're thinking about leaving Hungary. But the main question is here, we're all being really honest to the culture, to the language, to Hungary as a country and as a nation, as a culture. So we really need to kind of understand that Hungary needs a future, and so are the LGBT people in Hungary need a future. And that's what we are working for, to make a more comfortable and safer environment for them. But right now, I think for the most of us, it's an apathy that's undergoing with Fidesz. We're basically just waiting for the right policies and the right politicians to raise their voices and to see what they can do and achieve.
Do you expect or do you see any reason that the political situation would evolve quickly or not? Or what is your expectation on the evolution of Hungary, the society, and the situation in terms of what can come in the future?
Very hard to say. Very hard to say. They have a very stable government. The economy is not stable, but that doesn't. They don't really care about that, so to say, because their voters and the majority of Hungary. Let me just say out loud for the listeners, they do have a majority support in the country. It's not like the minority is keeping the majority of the country in check. They have a majority rule. They won their last election by 54% with a landslide. So they do have this majority rule, and they have a very good tool, the propaganda, to affect the views of the society and the viewpoint of the people. So even if there's a huge economic crisis, which there will be as we see it right now, they will find a way to explain themselves. So I don't see the government destabilizing and falling apart in the next couple of years. Obviously, we're going to do everything in our power to make that happen and help the Hungarian people see the true colors of the Orban government. So it's hard to say, and especially since the past couple of years, the society's openness decreased, so to say. But I still have hope. So if I wouldn't have hope, I wouldn't be doing this. But look at Malta, for example. They came such a long way in a decade. They had a ban on divorce 15 or 20 years ago, and now they're one of the top LGBTQ-friendly countries in Europe.
To conclude our discussion, we always ask our guests what their relationship with Brussels is. Is it your first time here? Have you had opportunity to discover a bit of Brussels and its queer scene?
Well, it's being, I think, the 5th time me being in Brussels. I'm always staying here just 1 to 3 days or something, and I'm always seeing the sights. I think what really describes my situationship with Brussels is being the favorite city of mine, Paris, and my boyfriend's favorite city is Amsterdam. So we agreed that we're gonna move to to Brussels because it's kind of in the middle regarding the culture and the food as well.
This is my 4th time visiting Brussels, and I have to be honest with you. I hope the listeners won't lynch me or something, but it's not my favorite European city. You're surrounded with great cities like Amsterdam, Paris, Berlin, even, and in Brussels, it's like an okay place for me, but I wouldn't come here for my vacation, to be completely honest with you. But I like the institutions, and I always enjoy the meetings I have here with European politicians, NGOs. So it's great for that.
David and Noel, thank you both very much for joining our first KET Talks of 2023. You can find more information about Forbidden Colors online at forbidden-colors.com, and don't forget to check the website of KET Magazine for all the news about queer life in Brussels. We will be back soon with more KET Talks. Thanks for listening.